to the fourth video in my series where I'm talking about potentially being able to join a coven. So today I'm going to be talking about open circles and covens. So what is an open circle and how is that different from a coven? Well, just a quick history lesson for those of you who are not familiar with this term. An open circle really developed in around the mid to late 1960s when there was a really large interest in Wicca and witchcraft, and the number of people wanting to be trained in Wicca actually outnumbered the availability of mentors and high priests and high priestesses to be able to train seekers. And so out of that was born the outer court system. Originally, the outer court system belonged to traditional initiatory witches, specifically the high priests and high priestesses of traditional covens, who decided that they would train multiple individuals and give them the opportunity to experience some form of Wiccan ritual. So the purpose of an outer court system was so that the high priests and high priestesses of individual small covens could provide training to those who were seeking witchcraft initiation, and it provided the space for those people to be able to experience Wiccan ritual, because as some of you already know, you are generally not able to attend a Wiccan ritual of a coven unless you are an initiate of the specific tradition. So the rituals that were provided in the open circles and the outer court system were similar to those that are practiced in a closed coven. So today, open circles still exist, but they seem to have changed and evolved over time, and they may not be the same as they were in the mid-1960s. So when we think about open circles today, there are different variations of open circles. So there are still open circles that exist that belong to traditional initiatory witchcraft, and then there are open circles that develop in a community where they may or may not be related to Wicca specifically. In many cases, the open circles that exist in communities tend to fall under this umbrella of paganism. So the rituals that are performed within that may or may not be Wiccan in their orientation. So when you're looking at open circles, it's good to be able to tell the difference between, is this an outer court that is related to a very specific tradition and that type of open circle, or is this an open circle that has developed in a community? An open circle, and the basic concept of an open circle is just that, is that it is open to other people. So if you think of an open circle versus a coven ritual, you could say that an open circle is open to anybody who wants to attend, and a coven ritual is closed because only initiates of a specific tradition and belonging to a specific coven generally will attend that specific closed ritual. So when we think of it in that way, it makes it a little bit easier to understand. Now, open circles, as I said, developed over time and have evolved to include other things. Not all open circles as they exist today actually have any relation or belong to a type of traditional witchcraft. Some may have developed in response to the need in the area where either there weren't any covens, or there weren't enough covens, or the people in the community didn't enjoy the flavor or the specific tradition of the coven. And so an open circle may have developed. And in this case, the open circles really kind of tend to fall under this umbrella of paganism. And so the rituals that you might experience in an open circle may not specifically be Wiccan. The membership in open circles is fairly fluid. There often isn't a lot of commitment, and people will attend as and when they see fit. And that is quite different from a coven, and I'll get into that later. But there are generally very many people who will come and go throughout open circles, even if the open circle as an organization has existed for many years. The membership is very fluid and changes over time, as sometimes do the leaders or the facilitators of those open circles. Another sort of defining feature of an open circle is that it's not usually initiatory. So in an open circle, the members of the public can attend, with the only caveat being that they are respectful of the members and of the principles of the particular open circle. So sometimes open circles are actually run by members of the high priesthood of specific traditions, but in some cases they may not specifically be training with the objective of those people entering their traditions or even their covens. But some members of the high priesthood may feel that they are doing a service to their community and they run these open circles for that reason. But in many instances, the facilitators are not initiated witches, and they don't specifically always even identify as Wiccans. So now let's talk about covens and what is a coven. Generally, the concept of a coven, and specifically in today's terminology, a coven has come to mean a group of witches who practice together. Covens are usually a very small group of people. Usually the maximum amount in initiatory traditions is 13 people. Some covens have less and some covens may have slightly more, but in general the concept is that it is a small group of people who are initiated into specific traditions and they practice their witchcraft together. The idea of witchcraft as a religion is that it's transformative, and that is also another difference between an open circle and a coven ritual. In Wicca, the religion of Wicca, the rituals are always considered to be transformative. This is generally not the case in an open circle ritual. Many open circle rituals tend to be celebratory in nature, where open circle facilitators will celebrate specific Sabbaths. Very occasionally they might celebrate an Esbat, but in general the rituals aren't designed to be transformative necessarily. So remember earlier I talked about an open circle and the very minimal expectations in an open circle. Now in a coven, this is quite the opposite. In a coven, there are expectations of participation, there are expectations of attendance, and there are expectations of belonging to a coven. So when you become a member of the coven, the level of expectation, participation, commitment, and so on is quite different to an open circle. Now in a coven, usually each member of the coven has specific duties that they would fulfill or specific roles that they would fulfill. So members of the high priesthood have a list of duties that they would fulfill, and each member of the coven will also have very specific duties that they would fulfill. Now in an open circle, and why it's very, very different, is in an open circle, usually the only people who take on any roles of responsibility and duty are those running the actual open circle. And sometimes in some open circles you will have a very small core group between 2 and 5 people who would help to organize the open circle rituals, and sometimes they would split the facilitation between them. But in general, the people who attend the open circles, there's very little expected of them other than just showing up to attend the ritual that is provided to them. So when you think of an open circle ritual, one of the very big differences between an open circle ritual and a coven ritual is that when you are attending an open circle ritual, very often those rituals or that ritual liturgy has been written for that specific event, because open circles don't always run every single Sabbath. They may pick a Sabbath here and there during the year to provide that Sabbath for others to attend in the public, but they don't have necessarily a ritual liturgy that is specific to each Sabbath. So every time you attend an open circle, you may be attending a very different kind of a ritual. So that is one of the big differences, because in a coven, the ritual liturgy for Sabbaths, for example, and specifically Sabbaths, I would say, has been passed down through the generations. So we would perform the Sabbath in this basically the same way every single time. So in a public open circle, it's quite public, and that means that anybody that attends will obviously get to see the other people in attendance. But in a coven ritual, usually membership is kept secret. So in a traditional initiatory type witchcraft, membership is private. Nowadays, I think that there is a little bit more leniency because, from my understanding, if you choose to be a public type of witch like myself, or somebody who is okay with saying that I am a witch and I am public, well then that's okay. But in general, you would swear oaths of secrecy within a coven that is an initiatory type coven. And also the rituals that are performed within an initiatory traditional type coven, those rituals are secret and private, and you would swear oaths to keep those secret and private, whereas obviously in an open circle that's not the case. So in a coven situation, each covener is committed to their religion, to their craft, to their tradition, and to their own learning and development as well. And each covener has been trained and initiated according to the specific prerequisites of the tradition. Only once you have been initiated in traditional initiatory witchcraft can you attend a closed or inner court type ritual. That's the other term that we use when we refer to Wiccan rituals that are coven based, is the inner court system. So you have the inner court and you have the outer court. As I've mentioned, there are very specific expectations of coveners, and some of those include attending the Esbats and Sabbats of the specific coven. And there are also other roles, as I mentioned, that need to be fulfilled in a coven. This is very different, again, from an outer court or an open circle, because you aren't required to attend any of those rituals. Attendance is not mandatory in an open circle, where usually in a coven situation, barring any unforeseen circumstances or illness, you are required to attend an coven ritual like a Sabbat or an Esbat. The term coven today seems to mean different things to different people, and as I've talked about in some of my other videos, there is no one dictionary or specific set of terminologies or definitions that is universal to all Wiccans or even all pagans for that matter. And even in general religious studies, there's no agreed upon terminologies. Different theorists or scholars will talk about things and they will define their own terms. So when I refer to a coven, I am referring specifically to traditional initiatory type Wicca or witchcraft. Now, when other people refer to covens, they may be referring to an entirely different concept. I have seen some people online refer to people who belong to an online group, and in this particular group there are literally thousands of members. They have addressed their messages saying, "Hello, coven." In other words, they would see that whole group as belonging to a specific coven, which is a little bit unusual considering the members of those groups may not even be Wiccan at all. So the point is to say that the concept of a coven or the definition of a coven really depends on the specific person who uses that term. So it's important that when you talk to people about covens or even open circles, to ask them what they mean by that. What does it mean when you are talking about a coven? Or what does it mean when you refer to an open circle or to an outer court? Because some people may use those terms very differently to what you may have that understanding of that specific term. Now, aside from those open public rituals where people are invited to attend a open circle in, say, a park or a community hall, there are also other types of open circles. Now, there are other types of open circles that will charge for you to be able to attend the ritual. Those are also considered open circles because any member of the public is free to pay to attend that specific ritual. So those are technically also a type of open circle, or can be referred to as a type of open circle, because it's open to the public, and also attendance isn't mandatory, and initiation is generally not part and parcel of attending that specific ritual. One of the things I've also noticed in open circle rituals is that when you ask people why they attend an open circle, generally their answer would be something along the lines of, I wanted to be able to experience ritual and meet people who are like-minded. And generally, in my experience, an open circle type ritual, or people who tend to attend those rituals more frequently, a sort of social group is formed, and it tends to end up, in some cases, resembling more of a social group than would, say, a coven, who is more focused on the religion itself. Of course, open circles in general, especially the ones that I was talking about earlier, they aren't necessarily focused on any specific religion. I would say that if you are somebody who wants to get a taste of what Wiccan ritual may be like, then you can attend an open circle. But please understand that what you are attending in public very often hardly even resembles anything close to what a closed or inner court ritual is like in a Wiccan coven. And I think many people don't necessarily understand this. And the reason that we don't talk about these things is because we will often swear oaths of secrecy and privacy around our practices within a closed traditional initiatory type witchcraft. Now, I can carry on talking about open circles and covens for hours on end, but that's going to make this video very, very long. So what I'd like to do instead is invite you to put your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what your experiences of open circles and perhaps even covens has been, and maybe one of the, or some of the major differences that you've experienced between the two if you are in a coven situation. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking and subscribing, and I hope you are all well. Blessed be.